Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here for a Friday Reads video, and this is very exciting because I finally finished The Count of Monte Cristo. I feel like I've been reading this book forever. Actually I haven't. I started it on March 1st and I finished it last night, which was April 15th. So I was really only reading it for 6 weeks, but it felt like I was reading it for a really long time. So let's just go ahead and get started with this one. So I ended up rating The Count of Monte Cristo 4 stars. I quite liked it overall. It's an epic adventure slash revenge story. It is super intricately plotted. The main character, Edmond Dantes, who is out for revenge, is pretty much playing 4D chess at all times. He's dressing up as other people to fool the people that he's trying to take revenge against. And yeah, it's just like, he really knows his enemy. So he knows what these people are going to do before they even know it. So yeah, it's a super intricate plot. And I also like the fact that after he has taken his vengeance, he sort of questions whether that was actually a good thing for him to devote a large portion of his life to doing or not. So I did appreciate the sort of moral questioning of that choice. And yeah, again, I quite like this overall. I really don't think it needed to be 1,400 plus pages. And I realize there are different editions of this book, and you know, some of them probably aren't this long, but this edition that I read was 1,462 pages, and that was really long. And I also just felt like there were a ton of characters involved, especially when you got to all of the revenge plot stuff, and so it was just a bunch of people you had to keep track of, and most of those people I really did not care about. I really only cared about Dantes. I did also end up caring about Monsieur Noirtier, although he's a paralytic and can't speak, but I enjoyed him nevertheless. But yeah, so I just kind of felt like we lost focus on Dantes once all of the Count of Monte Cristo elaborate revenge plot began. And I was upset about that because I really liked Dantes. I was invested in him as a character, and then to be then sort of held at a remove from him for, let me see, yeah, like the vast majority of the book, honestly. Because yeah, after about the first like 250 to 300 pages of this, that's where all the elaborate revenge plot starts. And yeah, and so you're pretty much held at a distance from Dantes for most of the rest of the book until, you know, right up until the end. And I didn't like that. But I am glad that I read it. Again, I admire how intricately plotted this is. And I did, again, like the sort of moral aspects of the book. And I'm glad that I read it. And I did enjoy it overall, even if I didn't care about all these other characters and just wanted to get back to Dantes. So, Count of Monte Cristo, 4 stars. I will now accept all of the congratulations. Thank you. Okay, so what else did I finish this week? I also finished Khaled Mattawa's collection of poetry, Tocqueville. I did this as a buddy read with Jen of Remembered Reads. Oh, I should also mention, the Count of Monte Cristo read-along was hosted by Summer at Cozy Reading with Quaker Cat, so I appreciate the fact that Summer hosted this because it prompted me to decide to, okay, I'm finally going to sit down and read this like epic tome of a book. So thank you, Summer. So I did this as a buddy read with Jen of Remembered Reads. And this was also part of my Arab American literature project for 2021, where every month I read one book written by an Arab American writer. This book was fine. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I admire the craft of the poetry more than I enjoyed reading the poems themselves. There are a few poems in here called PowerPoint. There's PowerPoint 1, 2, and 3. And those are kind of particularly interesting from a structural standpoint. I'm trying to flip to PowerPoint 3 so I can show you a page from it. Those were particularly interesting from a structural standpoint because they have, little matrices and stuff in them. So that was definitely interesting, and I don't think I've ever seen that done before. So I enjoyed the, again, sort of formal experimentation and inventiveness, especially in the 3 PowerPoint poems. But in the other poems, and also honestly in the PowerPoint poems, I just felt like I wasn't given enough information as the reader to gain an adequate foothold and figure out what the heck was going on and what I was supposed to take away from the poem. And, I told Jen, and I've said this on this channel before, I freely admit to being a lazy pleasure reader. So, I have to do a lot of critical thinking and reflecting and analyzing to do my regular job, which is to teach English. So if I'm thinking about books in an analytical, critical way as part of my regular day job and also as part of my research that I do that's also part of my job, I don't really want to have to do that in my just for fun reading. And I'm happy to do it a little bit. I don't mind putting in a little bit of work, but this was too much. This is the kind of poetry collection that I should have read in a graduate level seminar with my dissertation director, because I can't imagine making a lot of sense of this on my own. I do appreciate Jen, who sent me a link to this long interview with Khaled Mattawa where he talks about this collection, and that did help fill in some of the gaps for me, but only in some of the poems and not in all of them. But yeah, I'm a lazy pleasure reader, so you gotta let me know what you want me to take away, because I don't want to have to do a bunch of work to figure it out, because I already have to do a bunch of work in my regular day job. So I definitely would not recommend this collection for people who are just amateur or novice poetry readers, or just want to sort of read poetry casually to enjoy it. I think if you are someone who appreciates experimental formats, you might enjoy this for the PowerPoint poems. But yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend it unless you're just somebody who's really into poetry and likes things to be super intertextual and you really like a challenge, because that is what you will get from this book. So 3 stars. I also read and finished this week a play, because I realized that it was April and I hadn't read one play yet this year. And while it's not like I read a ton of plays, I don't want to read none either in the year. So I found this copy of Lillian Hellman's Another Part of the Forest. This is like a prequel of sorts to her more famous The Little Foxes, which I've also gotten a hold of and plan to read later this year, probably followed by watching the movie version with Betty Davis. So this is about a Southern family in Alabama during the Reconstruction period, and pretty much all of them are awful, except for the mom, who's just crazy. The mom is crazy, and everyone else in the family is awful. So, yeah, and it's just like a family drama, where people are pitted against each other. And it was fine. I didn't find everything that happened to be totally believable or compelling, especially given that almost everyone in this family is awful. But, again, it was fine, and I think it will be useful background for when I read The Little Foxes later. So I guess I'm at least intrigued enough to continue wanting to know about this family and what happens to them in The Little Foxes. So yeah, 3 stars. And then the last book I finished this week, I don't have here, I don't have a physical copy here to hold up because I listened to this as an audiobook. But this was Jonathan Metzel's Dying of Whiteness, How I think it's called something like How Racial Resentment is Killing America's Heartland or something like that. But I'll put the full titles down in the description box below. I listened to this as an audiobook. It was narrated by Jamie Rennell, who did a great job, by the way. So definitely recommend the audiobook version of this if you like listening to audiobooks. This is nonfiction, so Metzel traces issues that have come to be very central to white rural Trump voters, especially the kind of white voters who Democrats like myself often think of as voting against their own self-interest. So he talks about gun culture in Missouri. He talks about healthcare in Tennessee, and specifically the refusal to expand Medicaid under Obamacare. And then he also talks about austerity economics in Kansas, and particularly under Governor Brownback, one of those two. I'll put whatever it is here. And especially how those austerity economic policies affected schools in particular. So that is the structure of the book. So there's 3 parts. The first part's about Missouri, the second part's about Tennessee, the last part is about Kansas. And in all of those sections, he includes snippets of interviews that he conducted with people in each state. And those were often enlightening, even as they were also often maddening and infuriating. But definitely it gives you some insight into how people in those states are thinking, even if, again, like me, you're like, how? Why? This totally goes in the face of your own self-interest. So really the overarching argument that he makes here, and I felt quite persuasively, is that a lot of times these voters know that they're making choices that go against their own self-interest, but they would rather feel like they are a part of a white upper class, or not even upper class, but I guess they sort of get that association. But they would rather feel like they are part of a white upper class who is against them, some black or brown other person, an immigrant, some kind of minority, something like that. They are so wedded to this idea of being part of a white upper class that they would literally rather die than vote for policies that might help black or brown people. Even though they themselves would be helped by those same policies. And this is especially true of the refusal to expand Medicaid in Tennessee. There were a ton of white rural Trump supporters who, even though they personally would have been helped by Medicaid expansion because, you know, they themselves have numerous health problems, were just like, nope, we're not going to vote for this. This is terrible. You know, God forbid that, God forbid we should accept a plan that was concocted by a black man. And, you know, they don't say it as forthrightly as I just said it there, but that's kind of the undertone of it. So yeah, I did feel like the book was overall very persuasive, and it was also very informative. It got kind of data heavy for me, and there were a few times when Metzel starts explaining how his research team calculated statistical thing. I'm like, what? No, I don't care about that. So it got a little data heavy for me, but definitely very well researched and quite persuasive. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I would recommend it if you, like me, wonder why rural, poor white people tend to vote Republican, even though it seems to go against their own self-interest. It was very enlightening on that subject. So that's everything I finished this week. I finished 4 books. I'm currently reading 3 books. So I'm still doing my buddy read of The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga with Raina of Rainier Books. So I am over 60% of the way done with this. So I'm awaiting Raina's next check-in, and, you know, we'll figure out how much more of the book we're going to read after that. But this is still going well and I'm still enjoying it. I also started this week Terenolius by Claire G. Coleman. This is the April pick for Scott and Nell's Read Under the Bed book group. That's Scott and Nell from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. And this is also an Aussie April pick because Claire G. Coleman is an Indigenous Australian writer. And I am about 25% of the way into this so far, and it's fine. I'm not really loving it, but I'm willing to, give it some more time, and we'll see how it goes. So, more thoughts about this when I've actually read further along in the book. And then the last book that I started this week was Michelle Alexandre's The New Jim Crow, which I just picked up and restarted this morning. So I've read the introduction to this, and I definitely think this is an important and timely book. I kind of wish I had the updated edition of this, but oh well. I'm sure the statistics still hold, and they're probably even worse at this point. So whatever statistics she gives me, I'll just assume that they're worse by this point, because they probably are. I've only read the introduction to this, but yeah, I think it will be very good and very informative, if also infuriating. So that is everything I finished this week or am currently reading. If you have thoughts about any of these books, I would love to hear that. Please feel free to let me know that down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this. I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call your mother?